All right. Well, right as we went live. Oh, there you are, Jason.
Okay.
All right, cool. Hey guys, we're joined here again by Callum and Jason from Strawberry Rain Music to talk about the final four albums in the Zamrock Anthology. So I know it's been a couple of really intense and crazy weeks in the world, and so I think it's been nice to have the ability to take a pause and think about music for a little bit. I know my mind has felt like it's going in a million different directions trying to keep up with everything, but it's good to be talking to you guys. So I hope you're well. No Egon today. He can't make it this time around, but thank him for making it the first two. We had a lot of fun. So we're gonna pick up talk about four different albums, so episodes 3 and 4 of the box, which encompasses Ngozi Family, 45,000 volts, The Oscillations, I Can See It Coming, Fireball's Dots, and Crossbones Wise Man. So we don't necessarily have to go in order, guys. If you have one of those four that you feel like you want to kick it off with, uh, take your pick.
Maybe I could set the tone quickly for these four releases,
That'd
just
be
by
great.
talking about them with a kind of a very wide angle. I mean, just looking at these four in particular, these, with the exception of the Ngozi of 45,000 volts, these are three albums that are being reissued for the first time since the 1970s in Zambia. So very special that they get to kind of make their debut outside Zambia as part of this box. And yeah, you know, we consider them to be three of the greats. Yeah, three wonderful bands. Sorry, four of the greats. For key kind of characters and personalities to kind of get to talk about. So yeah, it's just something very special. I don't know if Jason wants to add anything.
No, I mean, I guess I could just touch on some of the groups, and you can add in as well. I could start off, I guess, with Fireballs. Fireballs is an interesting band in that when you look at them from afar, they basically released one album on Zambian Music Parlor. They released a couple of singles on Zambian Music Parlor, and they also released a single on Chris Editions. But when you dig deeper, you realize these guys had a really big impact on the Zamrock scene. They were the complete backing band for Teddy Chissy's debut album, Living Canny, on Zambian Music Parlor. They then backed Teddy Chissy on his Superstar album. They then backed Teddy Chissy again under the name Most Solid Sounds on his album. And last and definitely not least, in this box set, for the first time ever, the unreleased album, Dots, has now also can be added to their discography, which up until this point, you couldn't really say that. And
yeah.
The way that this was actually found is kind of funny. We were actually looking for the reels for the Over the Mountain album, which is the album they released on Zambian Music Parlor, and we had found Mike, and we were, because Mike is the lead singer of the Fireballs, by the way. I should point that out. And we were looking for the reels or clean copies of the Fireballs album, and he said he had the reels. So we went through and ended up working out some paperwork with him, and we went through all the details, and deal was done, and he ended up firing me the reels in the mail. I got the reels and listened to them, and I'm like, what is this? This is not Over the Mountain. And he goes, no, this is unreleased. This is, and inside the box, he had taken the contracts and literally on his own, rewritten them word for word, but swapped out the song titles with the song years. And he's like, "I just made you a new contract, and and I hope you're happy." It was quite a bizarre experience, but hey, it worked out in the end. And they're really, when you think about it, that would be what, 5 albums worth of material and some 45s. But if you really aren't aware of their history, they really only put out, up until now, you'd think they only put out one album. So they really are a hardworking band that probably should have a bigger name than what they currently do. And I think through this box set, people can appreciate the kind of music they were recording and releasing, and they're quite talented. So that's my piece on the Fireballs. I don't know if Cal, did you have anything to add there?
All I'd add, I guess, is that we get to know the Fireballs in their later period with this album Dots, and it's a really cool mixture of sounds that they're channeling at this stage. It appears as if they've kind of taken some notes from Teddy Chissy. They're introducing kind of funk and soul elements into their music. They're following the same trend as a lot of other Zambian bands during this period, and incorporating kind of Afrobeat elements, playing with kind of African time signatures, not just doing kind of garage rock.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to see them at a stage where they're really kind of growing as a band, and it's a really quite a special album. I think it'll be interesting when we eventually are able to look at their earlier material and work on the Mountain, for example,
Mm-hmm.
because then everyone will get to see another side of this band, a little bit of an earlier, grittier, kind of garagey sound. But there is a little taste of On the Mountain on the podcast series that we created, so you can get to hear the title track there. That's a little kind of a teaser, maybe, for the future.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see.
Sure. Go on.
I'm waiting to see who's gonna add the album to Discogs under the Fireballs page. We have some pretty dedicated customers that I don't know if you looked at the Discogs entry for the Zamrock anthology, but someone took the time to go like every single picture, cover, center label, everything,
Oh, wow.
list out every single credit. But yeah, I'm looking at the Fireballs page on Discogs. So far, it just has On the Mountain. So we'll see who does it.
Yeah, it's a pretty. But actually, Callum makes a good point in that this album does have a pretty unique sound. And when you take a step back and you look at the Zamrock scene as a whole, it does have its own little lane. It does have more of an Afrobeat leaning than some of the other Zamrock albums, but I in my mind, and sorry, to my ears, that's actually something I prefer after going through the scene the way I have. It's nice to hear a band that kind of did their own thing, and the result is what you have. And it's really cool to be able to pull something unreleased out of Zambia. It's not easy to do, and it won't be happening very often.
Right. No, I think that was a big highlight for sure of the entire anthology, was that we were getting to hear that album for the first time, and something that no one probably outside of a handful of people has heard. So thanks for bringing that to us.
And kudos to Jason for knocking out such a killer piece of artwork for that album.
Yeah.
It really looks like it fits right alongside all the other pieces of Zambian art. So yeah, it really looks good.
Thank you. Okay, the next band we will do, I guess, we can touch on Crossbones.
Cool.
Crossbones, I guess to start with, you could say that Crossbones, in my mind, the thing that's most important about Crossbones, and I'm not taking anything else away from the band, but they were the only Zamrock band that actually had a female lead. And I think that's something that should not be looked over, because when you look at the Zamrock scene as a whole, and you look at the contribution of female artists, it's rather small.
Mm-hmm.
And Violet uh, was probably the most successful Zamrock artist, female Zamrock artist ever.
Mm-hmm.
She actually, I don't remember if she recorded, if she was going to record it, Cal. You might remember from when you spoke to her. But she actually at one point was doing a solo album being backed by the Witch.
Hmm.
And it never, we know it never came out. We know that. I don't know if a single was recorded or a single came out. I don't really remember that. But that's obviously another important factor of Crossbones was the lead singer. I should have his feel that I should have the record here. I don't. It's Nikki.
Nikki Mwanza.
Nikki Mwanza. He actually came over from Born Free. So Crossbones was created from the ashes of Born Free, and I was actually very lucky to have seen Nicky perform live right before he passed. Unfortunately, Violet has actually passed as well, but I was able to watch him perform at a hotel in Lusaka.
Hmm.
He wasn't doing Zamrock at the time. He was doing Kalindalo, but it was nice to see him. But Crossbones recorded one album. They recorded some singles as well. I believe, according to Violet, the lead single that she sang on, the name, I can't pronounce it properly. Callum, do you remember how to pronounce the?
Oh, Mwe Balume Bandi.
That one.
Mwe Balume Bandi.
They sold something like 10 or 14,000 copies of that single.
Yeah.
Or something, yeah, which blows my mind, because you don't find that single anywhere. I don't know where they went, but it was actually really successful. The Crossbones album came out on Zambazay, which is the same label as Lazy Bones, and they ended up releasing some non-album singles as well that were actually pretty good. But they didn't actually put out a second album as a Zamrock outfit, which is a shame. Much like Oscillations never put out a second album, and some of these Zamrock bands unfortunately only had one. In Amanaz, actually, there's a few bands in this box that only released one album, but they did it right, and they made use of their opportunity, and they did the best they could.
How many stayed on, even if the band broke up? How many do you think, or do you know, stayed on making music versus going on to other careers? Like, was it half and half, or?
I don't. Cal may have a better handle on this, but I would say that a lot of them. Well, some of them had jobs on the like Teddy Chissy was known as the senior accountant. So he did things other than just Zamrock. There are some people, I think more of the guys like Ngozi and Jagari from Witch who had put out quite a bit of material at the time, and they were able to actually survive off music more so than some of these other bands that are quite smaller or didn't have the success. But they toured. Crossbones, if you listen to the podcast, the Crossbones actually talks about how at some of the crowds would get rowdy and there'd be fights, and it's quite entertaining actually, some of Violet's stories. But I don't know, Callum, what would you say about the amount of musicians that kind of stayed around versus moving on?
Yeah, I guess hard to tell. Just with respect to the ones that we're talking about today, I guess Violet did remain in music throughout. She kind of shifted into kind of cabaret type of work as a kind of a staple. But she's a very interesting lady, and she, before she got into music, she was kind of like an office administrator and kind of working for a big department store in Lusaka. That was her day job, and then she'd go and follow the bands at night, and she made friends with the musicians because she was into music, and eventually kind of talked her way into getting to sing with one of the bands, and it worked, and eventually she was kind of part of the scene. So Violet for sure. Ngozi, we know, kind of continued throughout the 80s. I don't think he ever did anything else.
I think Keith Level.
But yeah, a lot of these other guys kind of a lot of these other guys kind of moved on quite quickly. We talked about Amanazi.
Whoop, Callum disconnected. We'll be back. I don't know if you pronounce it Sonic or Sonic, but is asking any intel on Dr. Switchfoot or Foot Switch. Sorry.
Callum may know. I actually don't have a lot of information on Dr. Foot Switch. It's an artist that I have a few 45s by him that are non-album. I have both of his albums, and from what I understand, he also released some singles in Zimbabwe. But I haven't actually tried to. It's not an artist I've actually looked at tracking down at any point, because I believe when I spoke to Ethan early on, Egon was actually looking at it. So I kind of just step back and went, go do your thing. Yeah. So he's the one. He was the one who figured out about the Zimbabwe 45s. But
got it.
Good artist. I just don't have much history on it, unfortunately.
All right, I think Callum's rejoining.
Okay.
We can chat Ngozi family 45,000 volts as Callum joins, but I know I haven't shared many stories, mainly because you guys know 10 times more than I do. But my introduction to Ngozi family actually was Edith and I had worked on an Ayelu Mesfin compilation that we put out February of 18 through Vinyl Me Please. And as part of that, we facilitated like a 3-city mini tour for Ayelu and the Debo band. And for the first one in Denver, Madlib did an Ethiopian-inspired DJ set to close out the night. And that night, Mos Def was performing with Black Star, like down literally a couple miles away, and apparently like cut the show off early so that he could hop over and watch Madlib's DJ set. And so I remember he came up and was like, kind of, he would freestyle for a bit and be rapping and then stop and just be dancing. It was like he just wanted to be there, and he was right on stage next to like the DJ booth, and people were like mind blown that they were getting, this kind of secret performance. But I remember there was one song that he was like flipping out to, like he was just dancing in his own world. And I was like asking Egan, I was like, what is this? And he said it's Everything Is Over by Ngozi family. And so ever since then, I was like, got really obsessed with that song and Ngozi family in general. But so yeah, I can thank a Madlib DJ set and Justine Bay's dance skills for introducing me to the band.
Yeah, the Ngozi stuff bangs in a club if you have the right song. It's good. Really, the way the drums and the bass are EQ'd. And it's just fun music. It's just up tempo, and it's just it's easy to. One of the things I like about Zamrock is that it's just I think every artist says this, like some of the artists may have touched on it in the documentary, but it really is just uplifting music. It's just no matter what you're doing, you throw on some Zamrock and you just start to feel better. You start to get some energy. It's great stuff. Ngozi, I'll do my best to speak on Ngozi. One of the things is we always try to get as much information as we can, just because we're the scene is just interesting, and we're trying to get it like sponges. We're just trying to absorb as much as we can. But Ngozi is a franchise that Ethan took on early on, so I kind of we talked to artists, and unfortunately Paul passed away, so we have to go through other people and get stories through them. And Callum can touch on a lot of this as well. But I'll just say the Ngozi family was, and Paul Ngozi in particular, put out a lot of material. I mean, they started on Zambian Music Parlor, releasing Day of Judgment. They actually released a couple, three albums on Zambian Music Parlor, I believe, and a few singles. The Ngozi family went over to Chris Editions, and some fun information. I found Chris Editions like 8 or 9 years ago. I'm so bad with time. I found Chris Editions at one point a long time ago, and the way I found them is I found a 45 in the wild that said Chris's Furniture, but it had a similar label design, and I'm like, what the hell, what's Chris's Furniture? So I started asking around, and they actually still existed. And they started off as a Chris's Furniture company, and then they turned into Chris Editions after they started putting out music. But their first 45 actually says Chris's Furniture on it before they changed to Chris Editions. And they actually still had some records at the furniture warehouse, but they were storing it near all the paint strippers. So the records just like, you put the needle down, it's like, and then you could see like this crap building up on the stylus, and it doesn't matter how many times you clean it. And then they had like remnants of like their studio. They still had one of Paul's guitars in there. They're gone now, but I say that because Paul also worked with Telefix. He worked on his own label, and it just he was probably, when you think about it, he probably put out more material than any other Zamrock artist. And I think 45,000 volts is important because sonically it was a change from Day of Judgment and some of his work on Xander Music Parlor. He put out heavy metal, he put out Lightning and Thunder, and he put out Day of Judgment on Xander Music Parlor. But we over Chris's Editions, he did Even the Goes, he hit 45,000 volts. Oh, he also did 99% Confusion on Xander Music Parlor. But the 45,000 volts, it just had this almost like a reggae type bass, and you didn't really get this out of the Zamrock scene. And I believe 45,000 volts was also manufactured in Mozambique. Was it Mozambique or Zimbabwe? Town? Do you remember? Ghana?
It was
I thought
East Africa. I think it was a Kenyan pressing.
Oh, it's Kenya.
I've got it here.
I hit every country but Kenya, but it's important because not many Zamrock albums saw any life there. That's the cover for the actual Kenyan pressing. But not many Zamrock artists or albums saw any kind of life outside of Zambia. Mm-hmm. And this was probably one of the first that I can think of that actually made that happen. And it's just a killer album. I mean, it got it's just, I've seen 3 or 4 different pressings of it in Zambia. Same cover, some small variations. Maybe the stereo symbol is missing, or a lot of the covers, the front cover is inverted because you can see the watches on the wrong hand of Paul on represses. I guess they probably lost the original cover art. But it's just one of those albums that's just a classic to me, and it just touches on all the different aspects that the Ngozi family offered. It's so hard. They did so much. There's such a. What am I overlooking here, there, Callum?
No, I think you've touched all bases. Sorry, I dropped. I don't know what happened there. But I think if you're a guitarist, if you love guitar sounds, I mean, this guy is legendary in any country, any part of the world. If you know guitars and you know fuzz tone and wah and how kind of difficult and challenging it is to kind of manipulate that type of guitar tone, you kind of get just how special this guy is. It's a real kind of raw talent, and he kind of layers it on, and I think it's none better than on 45,000 volts, and it's kind of slightly over the top. And I think I ponder this guy because he must have been a real character. There's clearly kind of some a sense of humor involved in a lot of his music. There's obviously
Oh, yeah.
a kind of a wild sense of showmanship.
He's not always politically correct.
No, but we don't think, it's hard to tell, obviously, but I don't think he's being cheeky. I think, he is. He's more being cheeky than being offensive, if you know what I mean. When he sings songs like Respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think of that song as well.
Respect.
He's got Respect to the Husband is one of his songs.
And then he's got a song. I don't recall the name of it, but it's a song about how he met a white woman in a shopping mall and she turned out to be a spy. Like, he's just got some wild wild topics, like in how she was a spy and she was there to spy on Zambians, and just he's really entertaining. Really has some interesting song material.
A lot of charisma, and it kind of drips off him in respect to his sound, but the very few little clips that we see of him that are popping up here and there kind of obviously point to a very charismatic entertainer who was well loved in Zambia. A lot of Zambians remember him more for what he got up to in the 1980s when he was singing mostly in Nyanja and Bemba, and singing more like topical songs. Obviously, we find him quite interesting for his earlier kind of rock works.
His wife ended up doing singles, didn't she? Was that his wife? Or maybe I'm
yes. So he to add to what you said earlier, this guy was prolific, but he was obviously also very willing to kind of to work with anyone who was prepared to kind of put him into a studio, and he didn't necessarily overthink the albums too much. A lot of them, some of them are kind of a little bit repetitive. Some of them are misses, but some of them are just wonderful, perfect works of art. Just on that note, the Telefix singles are attributed in some cases to Paul and Linda Ngozi. So his wife was Linda. I'm not sure if that was a stage name, that they were kind of doing a rip on the Beatles, on Paul McCartney, and I suspect they were, and that kind of also just points to his kind of sense of humor. And actually, I saw a clip. I think I shared it with Jason today. It popped up for the first time for me on YouTube. There's a clip of Paul and Linda Ngozi from the Zambian broadcaster that's found its way up onto YouTube. So this is kind of early 80s Ngozi. And his wife's singing the lead vocal. And yeah, I mean, that'll give you a real kind of taste of his charisma, because he does a big guitar solo, but his dreads are kind of flying all over the place, and he's leaning back with his guitar, and the guys in the band are looking super cool and funky and enjoying themselves. Yeah, what a charismatic figure. I think there was just one more thing I wanted to add. Oh yeah, I think I found the golden key to Ngozi, and it only happened fairly recently, but I also shared this with Jason today. I was listening to Sabbath War Pigs the other day, and there's a line in War Pigs where Ozzy sings, Day of Judgment, God is calling. And that, of course, is the opening line for Day of Judgment album. And there's a lot of kind of that kind of crunchy guitar, kind of punctuation, where you hear it in War Pigs itself. Iommi plays a kind of like a hard chord, a power chord, and then stops, and there's a vocal, and then they start kind of playing again. So I think the golden key to Ngozi, or at least to his first album, was Black Sabbath's Paranoia. So I challenge anyone out there
Yeah,
to kind of do a kind of side by side listening to see
it's
if
funny you mentioned Sabbath because I remember we had another project that we had done with Now Again was Wells Fargo out of Zimbabwe, I believe. But they had a few songs where, man, the amount that they were lifting from Black Sabbath was pretty amazing. But it's like they're one of those bands that apparently made their way down into Africa in a pretty deep way because I feel like you hear them all over.
you know what I I often hear or see, and I don't know if it's like stuff on Wikipedia or just people who are getting a first kind of taste of Zamrock. They often make the comparison to kind of Hendrix and James Brown for some reason. That seems to be like the two names that are evoked to kind of explain Zamrock to a first timer. And I think people have got it wrong if they're coming in with those two names on their lips when they're talking about Zamrock. I think kind of the British hard rock speaks to Zamrock much more closely than James Brown does, for the most part, or at least in the case of Ngozi. And I guess Hendrix is in some respects kind of British hard rock. So, but yeah, I think it's kind of fun looking at Zamrock and trying to make the comparisons and trying to see where they kind of fit into a bigger global picture of what's going on in rock music. And
were they getting mostly British music just because of like British rule for so long? Was that like, was it kind of a direct distribution channel down there into their record stores, or was it?
Well, I think part of it was the mines. There are a lot of guys from Australia and the UK working in the mines, or over there to get get stuff out of the mines. And so some of the artists that we spoke to said that there were Westerners in the club, for example, and it wasn't necessarily their main influence, but some of them would do cover songs, for example. They would cover some of the songs from the Western bands. So I believe that played a role into it. But yeah, when I'll tell you, one of the things I was shocked at is while I was in Zambia looking through some records, and I ended up, I don't remember where I was. I was somewhere in Lusaka, and I actually found a copy of Human Beast, which is a pretty obscure British progressive album. And I found the actual British pressing there. But I think some of it had to do with radios and radio stations and promo as well. Like, for example, I don't want to get too off topic, but I did a lot of work in Indonesia over the years, and I found like 3 copies of Leafhound in Indonesia. Like, that Leafhound's a pretty significant record, but they're all coming out of different radio stations there. They're given there for promo. So I find that the UK stuff had pretty big legs in the 70s in terms of getting around the world and ending up. But a lot of it was through radio distribution and promo. I want to get back to Ngozi for a minute because I forgot about a pretty interesting part of the 45,000 volt story. 45,000 volts originally came out in Chris Editions, and then later on, Zambi Music Parlor actually ran a few copies of it. And then the rumor is that Paul got fed up with the labels and started his own label called Sound Project. And there's a bunch of 45s that actually came out on Sound Project that aren't on any albums, but he actually re-released 45,000 volts on Sound Project. There's 45,000 volts 2. And he just took the same cover and then threw a 2 at the end of the 45,000 volts. And then he changed the EQ. He added, there's some
Real
apparently
Frank Ocean move. He's like the original Frank Ocean.
Yeah, well, you know what? It it's actually that's actually a good comparison because he kind of just went in and he just repressed a few of his records, added a few little kind of EQing things, and they just said, with all, excuse my language, just like fuck the label. That's what the rumor is.
Yeah.
But it was just wild. I remember the first time I found a copy of that record. I was like, what the hell is this? I thought someone was just putting a stamp on it until you look at the label and you realize this is a whole different pressing of it and it sounds completely different, but all the bass is stripped out and so forth. But it's just it just comes back to how we were talking about how prolific he was and how many records he put out. In fact, I even have 45s by a group called the Junior Ngozi Family that, frankly, we don't know. I don't know who's in it. I just know that there's also a Junior Ngozi family. There's a Ngozi family. There's Paul Ngozi. There's the regular Ngozi family. There's Linda Ngozi. I mean, there are a lot of Ngozis. And then one of his nephews, his name is eluding me right now, but he also put out an album called Tribute to Ngozi. So there's just he holds a lot. His name holds a lot of weight in Zambia, and it should. And over the years, I will say, just in talking to people outside of Zambia, when I'm talking to record collectors, I'm talking to DJs, I'm just talking to people interested in music, I probably get asked about Ngozi more than anybody. People know who Witch is, obviously, and Witch is obviously an incredible band. But Ngozi just has that needle drop. It just seems like when you listen to Ngozi, you can just drop the needle somewhere, and people are like, oh, man, that sounds...
Yeah.
Where some of the other Zamrock, you have to kind of take it in and listen to it as a whole. The Paul Ngozi stuff, I mean, most of the time with his 45s or albums, you just got to put it about 2/3 of the way in, and you're just hearing the fuzz going crazy. And then, like I said, he makes up-tempo. I don't say this to insult him. I'm kind of echoing what Callum said, is that he didn't really put a lot of thought into it. He just made fun music that was, I guess you could say it was easy to dance to. I don't know. It was just easy to It was very easy to remember the choruses. It gets stuck in your head. Like, you can listen to the Ngozi album for the first time, and then the next day you'll be singing some of the songs in your head. And I think that was probably one of the reasons why he was successful. He created very catchy hooks. And again, like we said before, he was a character. He wasn't afraid to speak his mind. I mean, he put out records on Motaxis, Chris Editions, Telefix, Sound Project, Zambi Music Parlor. I think everyone other than Zambize. Am I wrong, Town? I mean, he
you're right on. Yeah, he and Strange Project in the UK as well.
He put out that double-decker bus single.
Right. I think that was recorded in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
The one that I found most interesting when I visited Ndola the first time, I managed to find the Telefix shop. Up to then, I wasn't all that aware of what Telefix was all about, except that it appeared on a series of 7-inch singles by Ngozi. And quite a beautiful design, actually. It's a picture of him with his guitar, and then it says Telefix. And it turned out that Telefix was a kind of an appliance store in kind of downtown Ndola. And they were still around in 2012 when I first went up there. And I kind of popped in and had a chat with an elderly lady who was the wife of the proprietor who had passed away, and she kind of told me a little bit of a story about Ngozi and this little series of singles that they'd put out. And she pulled out a little box. There was some dead stock in there, which was quite cool to rummage through. But basically, it was an appliance store, and they also saw an opportunity to sell some 7-inch singles at the same time as selling the stereo equipment. And it appears by all accounts that these 7-inch singles were really knocked out quite quickly, because they're kind of 2-chord kind of songs for the most part. Not much in the way of lyrics. If you've ever heard Ngozi's Christmas song and his New Year song, that was one of the Telefix tracks, and I think it's on YouTube. Basically, the side A is Happy Christmas, and that's the only lyric throughout the record. It's he just repeats Happy Christmas, and then the flip side is Happy New Year.
It's got
so he sings a whole song.
It's got good buzz, but both sides are exactly the same music, right?
Yeah, it's kind of just 2 or 3 chords and heavy guitars and him kind of chanting away. But yeah, he obviously had a deal with Telefix. She told me he used to set up his amp outside the store on the weekends, like when people were, this is a mining town in early 80s kind of
Yeah.
Zambia, and people would be on leave on the weekend. They'd have a little money in their pocket from wages for kind of working in the mines, and they'd pop by Telefix and grab a single or listen to Ngozi wailing in the street.
That's amazing.
Actually, one more quick thing about Telefix, because this will probably never have a reason to ever come up again. But we recently released a compilation of bands that never put out albums, and one of them was a band called Drive Unit, which happens to be Amanaz and Ricky Banda formed a group after the Amanaz album. And it's on this really it's actually on a label we've never seen before or since. And we've been asking Keith from Amanaz about it, and he's been kind of vague, but Callum has come to the conclusion, and I think he's correct, that was actually the very first Telefix single before they changed their name to Telefix. Because there's a credit at the bottom that I believe ends up back to the Telefix owner. Because and Callum actually put that together just because he was familiar with the names, having met the Telefix owners. But just a little side piece of history here that would probably never make its way on the net otherwise.
My dog is scratching at the door to let him in. So 1 second.
Okay. So what do you want to do? You want to talk about?
Yeah, I think. Shall we? Yeah. Let's shift on.
The Oscillations. I Can See It Coming, which is probably my favorite album art in the box.
Oh yeah, that man. I told the story in a previous podcast, but I'll say it again. I'll tell it again real quickly. I found that album. I must have been in Zambia around, what is it, between 2008 or 2010. I can't really put a right now, but I found that album when I was in Zambia. I didn't know it existed. It just so happened that I found it, and it was right before I was leaving. And the guy wouldn't sell it to me, and it just haunted me. It took me about a year to pull a copy of that record. But when I saw that cover, I was like, "Oh my! There's no way this record sucks. There's no way that this record isn't gonna blow my mind." And like I'm looking at the back, I'm looking at how it's handwritten in the photo, and oh man, I was so happy when I finally ended up pulling that record. But boy, yeah, that cover is just awesome. It's just. Oh boy, it's such a great record, and it's got such a story to it. I mean, if you haven't had a chance to listen to the podcast series, I would highly recommend it. And the Oscillation story is pretty, especially Victor. I think Callum could probably tell Victor's story better than having spent a fair amount. I've talked to Victor over the phone a few times. Callum introduced us. Has spent time with Victor, and he'd probably be better off speaking about that album.
Yeah, well, just to reiterate that cover, yeah, it's something else, and there's some lovely details in there. You can kind of really climb into it. I've kind of reached the conclusion that it's kind of like a goddess archetype that he's playing. That the illustrator kind of came up with. But there's also that strange little monster creature that you can see in the top of the crown of this figure. So all sorts of stuff going on here, and all sorts of stuff kind of going on in the recording itself. There's an amazing track, Kapande, which is also full of archetype, but it kind of goes into a kind of African folk tale, and I think very powerful song, kind of telling a story about a hunter that goes into a forest and faces off with a kind of a one-eyed monster with a big sharp tooth, who ends up chasing the hunter to the point where the hunter starts climbing up a tree to get out of this situation, and then he's faced with this kind of harrowing moment of being stuck to the tree while this monster is kind of chopping down at the base of the tree. So it's kind of like a Grimm's fairy tale. And Victor explained that Carpenter story was a kind of a little folk tale that his mum kind of told when he was younger, and it kind of stuck with him. And yeah, it kind of just plugs quite nicely into the Zamrock ethos, you know, kind of taking folk tales. I mean, this is what you know, I guess bands like Pentangle and those sorts of groups were doing with British folk in the 70s, you know, kind of channeling folkloric ideas and putting it into popular music. And it was so cool that kind of Zambia, it kind of cottoned on to doing this and creating these types of popular songs. What else to say about the album? I think what a exceptional guitar album. Jason introduced me to Oscillations. I never found a copy in Zambia, but I remember visiting Jason at his home in or near Toronto when I attended a film festival in Toronto. I went to Hot Docs. I think this was around 2014 or 15, and it was the first time we met in person. And we were focused on working on the band Blackfoot at the time. Mm-hmm. I had a film in festival, and I was thinking about Zamrock and trying to kind of pitch it to various people that I was seeing and chatting to in the festival environment, which is obviously what you do as a filmmaker, kind of trying to bounce new ideas and get some support. But yeah, I went over to Jason's house, and he played the opening track of Oscillations to me for the first time. Showed me the cover, which blew my mind immediately. But then played Request to God, and you know, that track kind of runs for at least 3 or 4 minutes, I think, before Victor starts singing, and it's just all about kind of setting up the guitar lines and these kind of syncopated. Jason?
Opening track.
Sorry?
It's the
track, yeah.
Opening track. So a long stretch before Victor comes in with the vocal, it sounds as if they recorded kind of a double track guitar lines. It kind of goes double tracked for a certain period. Then it sounds as if there's kind of like a different octave going on at the same time. Just kind of killer, inventive, cool guitar riffing, and then the vocal drops, and also a very special song lyrically. You know, it's a prayer. It's all about a guy who's in love with what he's doing, his music, his craft, and he's kind of, you know, praying to have a life in music, and that's Victor's story. You know, that's where he started, and he's still going.
I mean, one of the I'd have to, you know what? I'm going to carry on for a minute. I'm going to go run and get something to show everybody. But I just need a minute to get it. Okay, I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. What else to say about Victor? This guy is definitely one of the most inspiring musicians that I've worked with in the course of 10 years of kind of like investigating music and interviewing musicians for documentaries and working on reissues. Very humble, gentle, philosophical guy. He's I mean, we tell his story in the booklet. He tells his own story in the podcast series, but he suffered from polio in his early teens, and by his late teens, he was in a wheelchair and has been for his lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And he found a lot of solace in the guitar. He kind of pursued kind of guitar vehemently, kind of practicing, working on it. Also, what I find really interesting is polio did affect his arm a little bit, and yet he seems to have kind of like kind of absorbed that into his technique, the way he kind of handles the guitar. You can see a little bit of that in the film, and obviously in that little documentary. You get a little sense of his character, his personality, his energy. It's right there for you to see. What a cool guy, and I wish there was a little bit more from him in respect to recordings.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows? He might get a little opportunity to record some new compositions at some stage. Yeah. I know he's working on it, and I'd love to bring him to Cape Town if I ever got an opportunity to kind of put him into a room with a bunch of musicians here to see what they could come up with in an afternoon. Mm-hmm. Obviously it would just be for the love of music.
Right.
But yeah, what a cool mentor of a gentleman who's kind of been so gracious and with his time and his and storytelling and that energy. He's a very kind of religious guy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine, someone with who's kind of got like a strong faith, exudes a type of calm and knowledge that's always nice to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And Victor, during the Zamrock period, the Zambian news, I believe it was Lusaka. I think it was the Lusaka Times. They had every year they'd have a poll, almost like their music awards.
Mm-hmm.
And Victor actually won Guitarist of the Year in Zambia. He beat out all the big guitarists that obviously outside of Zambia have a lot bigger names, but Victor amongst his peers was seen as quite the talented guy. And I kind of missed a few things, unfortunately, but I think he may have talked about it. But Victor would actually perform on his back at shows. Like I believe there's a photo of him. So I was trying to find it. I couldn't find it, but there's actually a photo of him on his back with the guitar on his stomach playing. And it's just that some of the stories that he tells us about growing up in Zambia and the fact that he would have to literally drag himself through the streets to get home because of his condition, and that when it would rain, the sewage would overflow, and he literally be dragging himself through shit. Sometimes he would, and people in Zambia would make fun of him, and it's quite. I would say I said it before, and I'll say it again. But if you haven't had a chance to listen to the podcast and listen to Victor tell his story, it will change your perspective of that Oscillations album forever. You listen to that album; it's a great album. You listen to Victor talk about the album. He breaks down every song. He breaks down why they were recorded, the meaning behind it, and then you go back and re-listen to that album, and all of a sudden now, it just. Even the songs about the girl that broke his heart, it changed I hadn't heard that album. I knew those lyrics to that album before I had listened to a lot of the podcasts it's obviously all Callum's interview that he did when he was out there working with Victor. And he sent me all the raw kind of files, and I sat there and listened to like this conversation they had. And I will say that even having known some of the lyrics and known Oscillations album at the back of my hand at that point, it changed it for me. Like when I listen to it now, there are songs now that have a completely different meaning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a special album. Like Colin says, it's a shame they couldn't record more. We're aware of a single they recorded as a backing band, but we've never found it. I don't know if we ever will. But apart from that, it's just this is all they've done. This is it.
Yeah. Incredible.
What else to add? Is there anything to add about? No, I was just going to. Sorry, I was going to. I just remembered that photo does pop up actually in the. We used it in the documentary. If anyone wants to see it, yeah, I mean it's pretty epic. He was also a showman, and playing the guitar with teeth and rolling around on the ground with a guitar. Victor kind of went all out for a period, but yeah, I mean, I guess maybe kind of like just drawing some philosophical kind of conclusions about these processes and the reason kind of we go and discover music like this. It's ultimately it boils down to connections with people, and if this box set and this whole endeavor kind of means anything, it's about connecting with people, not only with artists, kind of making those building those relationships, but also just amongst ourselves, working with Jason, this kind of community of people who are kind of interested in this fairly obscure kind of sound and period and region. It's really wonderful. It's all about people at the end of the day. The music sounds amazing, but when you add the people factor, through the podcast, through the stories, it kind of like solidifies why it's worthwhile, kind of to be somewhat obsessive and to spend so much time kind of doing this type of stuff. They're really nice people involved, and it's worth the time and effort.
Yeah. Well, we certainly thank you for all the work that you guys collectively have put in over the years to find the music, build the relationships, tell stories, and be able to hopefully feed back into the communities where a lot of this art was birthed. And it's been about a year now, but we went through kind of an internal exercise as a company, and we're trying to like really drill down to almost like our brand mantra, if you will. And we really what we came out with was the idea of exploring music together, and the together part of it was the human part, because we realized that it's fun as a solo exercise, I guess, to dig into music history and things like that, but I agree with you. Ultimately, whether it's being able to talk with an artist in Zambia or, talk with you guys here and hear your stories about how you discovered this stuff, I agree. The human connection part of it is kind of the X factor that makes it really powerful. So, and I think, I guess, have gone through all the albums in the box, but I think the journey now that we know each other, Egon's been talking about you guys for years, but now that we know each other, I think we'll get the chance to do some more projects together. And I know we are discussing a potential project coming maybe later this summer with Blackfoot Youth Power.
Oh yeah, well, actually, because we've been working on it this week, I've got it right here on my desk. I just quickly grab something.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so we talked a little bit with Ethan and with Jason and Callum about kind of, as Vinyl Me Please, if we could find some other projects to partner on so that everyone who has been participating in the Zamrock anthology, will have kind of another chapter in the story, even if it's not in the box. And so talked with Now again about doing a special version of Peace by Black Power. and then I've been talking with you two about Blackfoot Youth Power. So it'll be the
Yeah,
Zambian Power Pack, I guess.
yeah. So the first project that Jason and I worked on together, like deeply, and maybe this is how we bonded in Zamrock, was over a shared affection for the band Blackfoot. I think we'd both heard The Witch and Amonaz by then, but we were like, yeah, we got to find the Blackfoot. This is the
We
one.
actually met because we got to say it. I mean, this is part of the journey. We actually met because the lead singer was lying to both of us, and he was giving he was he was giving Callum one story and the label a different story and myself a different story, and we ended up catching him in the lie, which helped us bond. And we're not mad at him. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to go into the details, but it actually we really bonded over that because it kind of we both realized we were both kind of doing the right thing, and that we. But yeah, this is the first project. Blackfoot was the first band that we really kind of jumped in together and started combining our resources to try to do the best we can with the material.
Yeah.
And so we released their 2 albums from Zambia Music Parlor in what was it, 2017. And that was very exciting. This was the first time we got to work with master tapes that had come from Zambia Music Parlor, who effectively we represent. We're kind of like the international ambassadors for Zambia Music Parlor, and the label director, who's in fact the son of the original label director, is our partner in Zambia, and the original A&R guy for Zambia Music Parlor is our kind of main kind of consultant and information person on that side, because of course he was deeply involved in all of the recordings. And of course, if you've seen the documentary and listened to the podcast, you will have been introduced to Billy Nyati, very charismatic, super high energy a personality that kind of makes sense to be the A&R guy for the Zamrock scene. But to cut a long story short, we bonded over Blackfoot at the beginning, and what we are going to bring to you guys is an alternate version of the Blackfoot album that we released in 2017. So this is Blackfoot debut on Zambia Music Parlor. That's what it looked like. But Zambia Music Parlor, in fact, acquired this album. It was an acquisition from a very small independent label that was operating in the town of Kitwe, adjacent to the town of Ndola, where Kuzwayo and ZMP were founded. So this little upstart called Goodson Records recorded the album Blackfoot Millie originally, released it, and then sold it off to Zambia Music Parlor, who decided to repackage it and give it another go. But the original cover looks like that.
This is rare. This is one of the harder records to find in Zambia. This the Liquid Iron by Dr. Footswitch, the Witch private pressing that's in the box. These are really hard to find because whenever you do find them, they're just
they look like that with tape and a little black pen. This one belonged to Emmanuel. So it is actually a white cover. This is that's a well used a copy over there. So yeah, we're creating a kind of a replica edition of the youth power from Goodson Records, which I think people will really enjoy. It's a killer album. So much great guitar on there, and another great story.
And this will be the only place to pick it up.
Yep. Well, and tell I think a lot of people, my guess is if you're crazy enough to buy a Zamrock anthology, they probably a lot of people already know about Strawberry Rain. But I guess you guys have a website or D2C store as well that people, if they want to buy some of your music direct. What?
Well, I wouldn't say we have a web store. We're kind of we're kind of we're kind of like the mom and pop thing. I mean, we obviously we fulfill orders, and we like to meet customers and sell direct. So
Yeah.
I'm in the process of setting something up that's a little bit more. Okay, I shouldn't say a little more. I'm in the process of setting up an actual web store that's going to
Yeah.
function like a web store should function.
Yeah.
But for now, for the most part, I just tell people to DM me on Instagram, and then I usually sort them out within a day. So I
What's
mean,
your
it
Instagram
goes
handle?
well, but it's just we spend so much time. Like one of the things people may or may like, we do all like the artwork, we do the marketing material, we do all the like, we find the artists, we do like all the like the write ups and everything. So it takes up quite a lot of time, and we spend so much time focused on the actual music and the artists and finding the stuff that I know it's not the smartest business sense, but
Yeah.
we kind of let the website slide for a bit. But you know, the good
Yeah.
news is the materials coming out. People notice. People are contacting us. The things. A lot of our projects have sold out because you know just the music speaks for itself. But we appreciate the plug. We are getting up to speed. We're nowhere near like the level of your website, but you know we'll be there in the near future. But I appreciate the plug for that.
Yeah. And where can people follow you on Instagram?
At Strawberry Rain, and they can also at Sharp Flat. Callum also has runs a label called Sharp Flat that is putting out a lot of awesome material from South Africa, and will also be putting out Zambian material as well. And his knowledge of African music and his ear and his selection is something that you should take note of. He recently put out a record called Coliso that is quite. If you're into Zamrock, I think you'd be into this record,
Nice.
Coliso. It's a South African rock outfit that touches. There's a little bit of jazz fusion in there, but it's definitely a rock album that
Yeah.
has been overlooked over the years. So
Awesome.
Sweet.
So, yeah,
Thanks. Yeah. Well, the last thing I'd say is we did set up a while ago a kind of an independent resource for Zamrock. It's basically a little blog spot, and it's zamrock.org. That's I'll put it in the
Cool.
comments here. And that's just a little resource for kind of reading some interviews, some articles. So, you know, hopefully it's useful. For example, if you're completely new to Blackfoot, you could go onto zamrock.org.blogspot.com and watch like a little 5-minute interview with one of the artists.
Nice.
And I think there's also a link to a kind of some liner notes about the band over there. So just a fun place to kind of kill some time if you want to catch up on some of the stories that we've done over the years. I think it's
Perfect.
going in
There
over
you go.
there.
Yep. Awesome. And
But
like we said,
yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Callum. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I mean, just because it feels like we're kind of closing down. And yeah, I love what you said about the storytelling side of the VMP ethos, and it's been really cool kind of plugging into that because I think we share that that aspect, you know, of kind of contextualizing music and telling stories and creating like a little bit of community around it, which is great. And it's been a lot of fun kind of doing this project with you guys and
this is really cool.
Ethan.
This being able to tell us the side, like a lot of the times the reissues come out and people listen to the music and enjoy it, but being able to tell the story and do these whatever this is. It's been really, we appreciate the opportunity, and we thank the customers for tuning in and listening. and learning about Zamrock. It's something we care a lot about.
I remember the night that we put it up for pre-order was kind of the first, at least in the US, it was really the first week where the majority of the country was experiencing what coronavirus was potentially going to become and was starting to be on lockdown. And so I remember being a little bit nervous, just of if anyone was even going to show up to buy it, because there's so much just going on, I think, in the world and people's minds and so much uncertainty. And I remember calling Egon maybe 3 or 4 hours after we put it up for pre-order, and I think at that point we had already sold like 350 or 400 copies. And just remembering how even in the midst of chaos, it's like there's still just this core group of people that, like we're talking about, wants to go on the journey, you know? And it was pretty special. We were commenting, I remember that night, of like, hey, how lucky we are that we get to do what we do, and that there's people who care enough to, participate, buy product, and just the cycle that starts in Zambia in the 70s somehow ends up, on a live stream in 2020. It's a pretty amazing journey. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we appreciate it again. It's we're really proud to have you guys pick up something like this and do what you did with it and help spread the word. And it means a lot to us, and it means a lot to the guys in Zambia as well. It's a real proud moment for a lot of guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Our pleasure. Well, thanks guys so much for this, for all the work that you put in. Please, everyone, go back, watch the documentary. It's amazing. Listen to the podcast. I really think, yeah, it's so good. And I think, the goal with all of our anthologies is, of course, you're never going to know everything about something, but that, if you watch the doc, listen to the podcast, and listen to all these albums, you're going to know more about Zamrock than 99% of the world. So go dive in if you haven't already. But thanks so much. And yeah, we'll stay in touch because we're going to be doing more projects together. So stay safe.
Yes.
Awesome, man. Look forward to it. Thanks, Cameron. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, speak soon.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye.